Hello everyone, Sombre here. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different for this video. This will be looking at how I do my process of creating sprites for the mods that I've made. And this is, I'm not going to do a very typical sprite for me, which would be a size 2 thing like a human, elf, dwarf, orc, something that size. I'm going to do something a little bit larger because I think people tend to have a bit more trouble doing the larger sprites. So I'll go through my process. This is my first time doing it, so this isn't going to be a very polished video, but hopefully it'll be interesting. So my starting point is usually to find some reference art for the thing that I want to do, and also to go and see if there's anything already in the game that's roughly the right shape or give me some interesting ideas for how I actually want to do the sprite. So in this case, I'm doing a Treeman for the Warhammer Wood Elves faction that I'm working on. I've already found some reference art that I like, and I'll show you that in a moment. But I was looking for some things in the mod inspector that were roughly the right shape or were very similar things. So I think that Treemen are going to be something around size 5 or size 6. And I had a little look and I found that the Etin Mandragora is a nice sprite that I could potentially base a kind of basic structure of a Treeman off. And then we've also got Vine Ogres and Ivy Kings. Let me just go and get the Ivy King. So this is in the mod inspector. I'll put a link to the mod inspector in the description, of course. Here is the Ivy King. Double click on this. Here he is. So if you want to get the sprites from the mod inspector, all you've got to do is select the sprite you want, the base sprite or the attack sprite, and then right click it. Copy image for me, copy image is the right one to use. And then I go and I paste it in the graphics tool I'm using, which is PaintShop Pro version 6, a very ancient version of PaintShop Pro from the 90s. That's just what I'm comfortable using. You can see I've already got the Etin Mandragora in there. If I were to paste this new selection, this is what it would look like, but I've already done that. I've already gone and got the Mandragora. And you can see that in the attack sprite for the Mandragora, I have actually trimmed away some of the vines and things. And I'm going to just show you how I do that quickly for the main sprite, because I think the Mandragora is a nice shape kind of to use for our tree men. So in this case, there's various ways you could trim this away. You could get a completely black paintbrush and things. All of your paintbrushes and so on in PaintShop Pro have options associated with them. But for this, I would just kind of crudely drag select that, chop it away, which will put it as the background color. So I'm just chopping away some of these bits. If I wanted to quickly clear up the edges and things, I usually use a clone brush, which is just where you can right click on one place and then left click on another place, and it clones the palette. So like if I wanted to clone his face, I could do this. There we go. It can be useful for just moving things quickly. I find it useful for just getting black coloration and stuff and just clearing up some bits. So if we just want to clear this up, I'm not being very efficient about doing this, but we just want to get rid of some of these vines and things. Let's straighten this leg up a bit. Get rid of this. So black is the background color for Dominion sprites. So this will all be, the black bits will all be invisible when we actually put him in the game. Just clear that up. Clear up this vine here. Do we want 2 heads for our tree man? Probably not. Let's get rid of that head. We also probably don't want 3 arms for our tree man. Now we could keep that arm and try and use it for something else, but I think that this shape is roughly more appropriate for a tree man. Maybe the head's a bit too far forward, so we just select that and kind of roughly move it. Remember, we're just trying to get the shape of the tree man here. We're not trying to do a complete graphic or anything like that. But maybe this is the kind of shape we want. Perhaps this the body's leaning forward a little bit too far. They're a bit more straight standing than that, the tree men. So let's just move this body across a bit. Just to quickly fill this in, I'm just going to use the clone brush to grab this and just fill that in. You can use the clone brush to just kind of extend stuff. Like if you wanted to go, oh, I need like another rib, you could just roughly go, oh, there's another rib using the clone brush. That's the kind of thing you can do. Maybe if you want an extra bit of bone to go alongside this one. There, he's got 2 bones in his arm now. I do a lot of these things by feel, so I'm not going to be telling you like this is how an artist would do it. I don't really consider myself an artist. I just do things bit by bit, and in this video, that's going to be my approach. I'll just be kind of picking away at it and talking a bit about what I'm doing. So let me actually switch this so that we're looking just in PaintShop Pro. you can see that the file I'm using I've just called aaa_woodelves.png, and this is typically the way that I work. I'll have what I call a sprite sheet, which is just like a big palette where I doodle around making the sprites before I take them out and use them as individual sprites, or maybe put them into little different groupings or something. But if I just zoom out for a moment, you can see I've got a lot of stuff going on here, lots of different sprites I've been working on, horses and wood elves and things. And this is my working area. This is just how I like to do it, and then I'll take them and turn them into the individual units. But yeah, typically I just work on things in this area. I can just quickly go and look by zooming out and going, oh, what if I wanted to get, what foliage have I done somewhere? Okay, well here's a way watcher. He's got a cloak with some foliage on it. So I might like copy some of these elements and say, okay, maybe if I wanted like almost like a foliage loincloth kind of hanging down, let's just grab a bit of foliage there. This is usually how I would start drawing something, just very roughly, and then you can use the clone brush to, generate a bit of a quick bit of like a foliage loincloth or something like that. The first thing that you want to do, the first steps in doing a graphic, are really just kind of rough stuff to get the basic shape of what you're trying to do and the basic like blocks of color. I think it helps you work out what it's going to look like in the end, and just have it's almost like preparing your materials. A lot of the time I think of painting as being rather like as doing sprites as being rather like painting a miniature, where you start off with doing like blocks of your base colors, but before you even have that, of course, you have to have the miniature to start with. So it's almost like you're sculpting a miniature to begin with. You're sculpting a skeleton, and in this case our skeleton is this Etin lad here. Now, if I were to just look for a moment at the source material that I'm using, this is my kind of inspiration. It's a nice painting of a tree man done by a proper artist. This is kind of the look that I'm going for to some extent. Maybe I don't want the claws to be quite like that. Maybe I don't want it to be quite such like a horned look on the head. But I quite like the look of these like almost carapace sections of wood and things. I like the kind of carvings into them. We'll probably have those glow because that's something that we've done with our treekin. I can show you those. This is a unit card from Warhammer Total War 2, I think. Or no, Warhammer Total War, showing like a treekin from the Wood Elf faction there. And that's a bit of art that I've been using for inspiration. But you can see that the treekin that I finished ended up looking a bit different from that. But yeah, it has some similarities. Here's like an early version of that I was doing when I was just doing the shape and the right rough colours, and I decided to go for a darker look for it, more like the Winter Dryads. So going back over here to look at this tree man, what I would probably say is he's going to be a bit more kind of erect than this Etin. He's going to be standing up a bit straighter. He's going to have possibly longer legs in proportion to his body. We can see that this rib cage is going to be kind of more lifted up into this chest segment. But I don't really want to take this and just start like making tweaks to it, because it will remain basically the same thing. I think what I want to do is just use this as the general shape, and then take big blocks of color, get the general shape, and just start kind of carving it into something that I like the look of. So what I'm going to do first is just going to grab some color here, just using an eyedropper. Just going to get a nice brown. Going to take a paintbrush. Probably going to work at it with size 2. You'll have to do a lot of things with size 1, working 1 pixel at a time, which is pretty crazy, but that's the way I like to do it at least. I'm just going to put the opacity up high here. I'm not going to put it all the way up to 100% because so if you put it to 100% opacity, you just get these straight like blocks of color, right? If you have it lower, let's say 20. 20 is something I work with a lot. If I were trying to like do shading and highlighting, I'd probably use about 20 opacity. Here you can see because it's being painted on black, obviously, it takes multiple strokes to build up the color. So we could build up from black. We could build up from the look of this in, as it currently is, which is kind of green with bits of bone. Or we could start by saying, okay, well, I want everything to basically be this color. So maybe I start by just having a high opacity. I'm not going to worry about the underlying colors here. And I'm just going to have this at size 2, and I'm going to get the rough shape of the bits of the tree man painted on there. And if I need to go over it twice, that's absolutely fine. So we're going to just do the head of the tree man roughly. Very rough kind of head shape of the tree man. I think we do want some kind of branches coming up, so I'm just going to have this kind of sense of almost like antlers, but a little bit more tree-like than antlers. so they don't quite end up looking like it's just got antler horns, a bit like the Lord of the Wild over there. So we'll have some kind of tree branches coming out there. This one is going to stick out. This is kind of a bit further in the background, and it's going to stick out a little bit less because it's in the left side of it. You can see it's from the way it's standing, that's further back, that horn. But yeah, we'll just have some more bits here maybe, and we can switch down to size 1 to add more detail if that's going to be useful for us, just for the purposes of thinking about it. Again, we're just doing the shape here, so it doesn't really matter. But if it will help us visualize what we're trying to do, let's put on some little twigs and things. And you can see I'm not really paying that much attention to whether this is looking exactly like the thing I'm copying down here, the thing I'm inspired by at least. I'm just kind of getting a rough sense of it. Maybe I think that's a bit too much, so I'll just take the clone tool and just wipe off some of those. Always just go back. Some people like to work with lots of layers, and you can do layers in PaintShop Pro, but I just don't like to. I prefer to just work just in a big environmental kind of palette like this. Let's use the black, which is our secondary color here, to just darken this bit around the neck, and then we'll give the impression of a neck there, maybe darken that a little bit more. We want kind of large shoulder elements, so we'll just build that up over the top of those. Got a bit of a linebacker look at the moment. We'll have this come down, and then we know that we want this torso section here to have a kind of gap between it. So I'm just going to do quite a heavy bit of shading there. I have a gap between that and the body section, so we'll just fill in the body section. A few quick sweeps. Don't really want this to be quite so thick. I think we want to really narrow in the body section, so we'll just do that there. Maybe add a bit more here. Go. We know that we probably want, well, let's have a look at him. He's got this kind of upper torso, the midriff, and then he's got like a plate on the front there, and he's got the kind of carapace of the leg comes up over the hip. So let's just do that. Let's have another darkened bit there. We'll have the carapace of the leg coming up over. Draw the carapace of the leg in. Goes down to roughly kind of where the knee is, like that. We want the shin to be very similar kind of shape. Again, doesn't really matter. We can change the shape of this afterwards. You know, it looks a bit wonky. Maybe we'll go and take brush and just clone brush and just clean that up by putting in a bit more of background. Bit there. Have a big foot. I think they've got fairly large feet, the treemen, to keep them upright. You can see really just looks like splodges of colour kind of at the moment, but I promise you this will come together. Of shading in there, and then we'll have this plate that's in front here. I think that this plate is what we would attach a kind of foliage style, almost like a loincloth to. So let's just grab that using a free tool. It doesn't matter if we're kind of going over the edges. We're just giving the impression of the shape at the moment. We can just fit that in there. Let's just put that in there. I'm going to draw over some of that. It's fine. Shade that in a bit more. This plate's going to be kind of built up like. Go. Probably put some more fine detail in there. I think a little bit more shading at size 1 would be good. Do that. Lovely. And then we want the other leg, size 2 again. There we go, fairly straightforward. Make sure that the knees are roughly the bits of the limbs are roughly the same size. That makes sense, obviously. Just fill all of that in. Okay, we're already starting to get the shape of the tree man. This is good. Because it's kind of like a carapace. It's like splayed out at the ends. Another one in there. More shading. Kind of flared. And if you wanted to kind of go, oh well, this leg is a little bit further back, you could just quickly select all of this. This is a bit more in the background than this one. Just make the brush very big. Whack the opacity down. Just quickly make this entire leg darker. Just right click once, there we go, it's a bit darker, just to show that it's a little bit more in the background and this leg's a bit more in the foreground. This isn't really getting to the highlighting and shading part of this, but it's fine for now. Let's go back to size 2, I think. Have another foot here. Go. There's our other foot. Remember, we can clean up all of these bits. At this stage, if you are relatively new to doing sprites, you'll be looking at this and just going, "Oh man, this does not look good. Is this ever going to look good?" And that's a feeling that will probably be familiar to anyone who is someone who's done miniature painting before. There's a point where you're just doing like the base colors and you're kind of building up on the miniature, and you can't really, at least I can't, imagine what it's actually going to look like at the end. I just have to have a bit of faith that it's going to look good, basically. You start to go, okay, I can kind of like, I'm getting a sense of this. It's important to keep going back to your inspirational material and just going like, yeah, we want this kind of like a little bit of dynamism in here, this sense of him being this big, strong thing. I think that his legs should be a bit closer together and a bit longer, perhaps. So once we've done the arms, I'm probably just going to chop them about a little bit of a different shape. Just going to shade around the edge of this arm. And I'm just doing that so I can see where the arm is for myself, really. Maybe have a big sweep of it there. We want to get some of that kind of flaring in again. Let's have the arm have a sort of a joint at the wrist. This is kind of our arm. Shading there just for now so I can see which bit's the arm. Definitely have a joint at the top of the arm there. This is going to flare out a bit as well, I think. Just going to flare out like that. Lovely. This arm, I think I would like it to come down a bit. I'm just going to really crudely make this into a bit of a diagonal. Because we're just doing the rough shapes, this is fine. This is not how I would recommend doing a diagonal if you're doing one more seriously to move an arm, but move the arm down a bit. I think I'm going to bring it forward a little bit. Move it down a bit like that. Gives us more room to work with. Bit of shading. In comes this arm here. See. Again, sweep back a bit, but quite so light. The other arm. Bit of shading at the wrist joint. There we go. This is starting to look more like a tree man, isn't it? It's kind of moving the right direction, and that's what you want to see. Just going to shade the back of this over it again. Yeah, I mean, it's not looking too bad. I think he's too thick. They are quite thick-limbed, but I do want to move these legs closer together. So I'm just going to grab the old lasso. Just going to move this leg in a bit. Probably gonna grab this, move it down a bit like this. I'm going to turn this into a little bit more of a diagonal. Like that. Just fill in the gap. It's fine. Let's have this leg be a bit longer at the shin as well. Down here. Lovely. Same thing with the other leg, of course, we want them to be level. Let's move this down first. This entire section down like this a little bit. Move this side of the leg in. Looking alright. Misclick, but that's fine. We'll just tidy up these edges slightly. Just sweep on down like that. I think we're getting the rough kind of shape of the tree man. Now, when I first started doing this particular sprite, I wasn't sure that I wanted to do this as a video demonstrating my process to anyone. So I had actually already started doing this sprite. This is my second kind of go at giving a sense of what this would be like. I think I'm going to have the gaps in this tree man have a bit of green in them. I'm going to kind of use that as a dark shading color. So just giving a sense again. Just a little sense. Let's get a bit. It's brown. See, opacity's good. Definitely want to kind of flare that bit up. think that foot is protruding a little bit too much for my taste. Let's just take some of that off. Yeah, so this could be the base for our tree man. Now, of course, I could still bring the legs a bit closer together. I could change his posture a bit if I wanted to start thinking about his posture. Maybe these arms should be repositioned. Maybe they should be a bit longer. He looks like he's got fairly long limbs. So maybe we would add a little bit of length to his arms just by, again, I'll just move this across a little bit. We're still using a nice higher pasty brown. Just fill that in. Maybe this arm here. So here we've got a problem that if this is moving in front of his body, it's a bit harder if I want to draw like claws or tendrils or something. It might be better if it's a little bit pushed back at a bit more of an angle. Because we're just doing the shapes, we haven't done really much detail at the moment. This is very easy stuff for us to do. So we can push this back a little bit. Let's just say maybe the fist ends up down here, and we'll just break this shape up so that it's roughly the right shape. And of course, because at this stage we're still getting this sense of what this guy looks like. None of this really matters. I think I'll have a little flare of something there. Maybe there'll be some bits coming out. I think that you can see on him he's got kind of all bits spiraling out of him in different places. It's good to give him that kind of detail, but we'll do that a bit later. I think this, I want to push the opacity up nice and high for this. Let's get it back to 60, and we'll just kind of put a fairly straight arm there. Let's get the joint represented again. This bit's going to be sweeping up, maybe just quickly give us an impression of some of these bits of squiggles and things coming out of him. His arm's got kind of a branch coming out there, just spidering out. Maybe there's a bit. But I'm sounding a bit Bob Ross at the moment. I guess that's just natural when you're painting and talking to an audience at the same time. You just naturally start sounding a bit Bob Ross. Maybe I'm unconsciously copying Bob Ross. These aren't necessarily going to be the branches and things that are going to stay in the final Treeman. They're just giving us, again, they're a bit of inspiration. They're giving us the impression that we want, the general shape of this Treeman. Something like a big coming out. Cool. Shading. I'm not really doing the shading at the moment, but you can see I'm, without thinking about it, sometimes I'm just adding like a bit of shade to the interior of a leg or the back of a leg, or just making something stand out by just putting a little bit of shading around the base of it. When you're doing the shading and highlighting, it's basically the same process that I've been doing here. Let's give him his eyes because I think that'll be helpful for us to think about what he looks like. I think tree men have quite a, yeah, they've got this kind of, it's like they've got quite a mean look to them. They've got a little bit of a broad nose in the middle there, and I think their mouths are it's quite a jagged look. Maybe we'll just have him have a little bit of a frown even. Be absolutely fine. I think his face is a little bit squashed up actually. I might make it a little bit taller, so I'm probably just gonna grab this. Just wash that up by one. Maybe I will even move this down so that the mouth is further down on this, this head. I'm just grabbing some bits here. Still just drawing the shape fit, so I can just. I mean, it looks silly at the moment, right? But trust me, it will eventually look like a slightly cartoonish because that is my style. But it will look good. It will look decent. And when you're doing art, when you're doing pixel art for Dominions at least, that's something to bear in mind. It's just that there's moments when you're going to go, oh man, this looks terrible. This looks just garbage. What am I doing? But you just keep going until it looks good to you, or you're satisfied enough with it. And that's the key: is you don't go, I'm not happy with this. I find at least I don't really go, I'm not happy with this, but I'm just gonna stop. I instead will keep going until I'm happy with it. And What I'm happy with has changed over time. Maybe I'm not happy with some of the sprites I used to do. You know, I've just gotten better with practice. But yeah, I find that works for me at least. To not give up on it while it's still like at this point, you could go, I mean, that's kind of the best I can do without spending loads more time on it. Well, you know, if you're happy with that, it's completely fine. But I think we can make this look a lot better without spending a huge amount more time, you know, making it look better. Have we got enough of a broad chest? This guy looks like he's got a much broader chest to me. I think we want to boost that up. So what I'm going to do is just going to chunk the guy up, section him up like this. Let's grab this arm. Let's grab this. Grab this. Leave a bit in the middle. We'll push all of this one to the left. I think we will push pretty much all of this one to the right. Go back to our tool. Again, we're still doing the shapes. If we were doing this later on when he's more detailed, you have more work to fill in these gaps. But at the moment, it's fine because he's all just rough anyway. Yeah, I think I might want to move the... So what's the neck look like on this guy? He's got lots of kind of tendrils and things coming up around. I think we'll just very quickly grab this. Whoops. Just grab this and move it back a bit. I definitely want there to be like a sense of like a collar bit to this carapace here. And then some spikes and tendrils and things emerging. Maybe they'll be a bit darker. We'll keep them darker, you know. There's a sense of a neck there, just the impression of a neck underneath this jaw. I think that at the moment, the fact that his eyes are completely dark, I mean, I'm going to fill them in with some kind of color off here, you know, kind of a supernaturally color. Maybe it won't be this one, but just as an example, we throw that in. That opacity's too high. I don't like it. When you're using a really bright color like that, you want to have lower opacity, I think. Get this opacity reduced. Shading of this. Yeah, this is really, really bright because we're going for like a glowing look. There's energy coursing around inside him. Okay, this is kind of the shape. This shade will be like the energy that's coming through, and we can mess around with the color for this later, but we'll also probably just have some kind of symbols and squiggles and things. We don't need to give too much thought to what they'll look like at the moment, but maybe it will be kind of this shape. Let's just put like a G squiggle on this guy. We can always move this, it's fine. This is just to give us an impression of the kind of thing that we're going to be doing. It's like a squiggle trays up here. Let's just have a loop here. So you can see he's going to have these kind of symbols on him, and then we're going to make them glow. Those are going to look pretty good. We could even have maybe some parts of his body where there's glowing bits coming through, and the gaps, the joints of his arm. Going to have more of a joint there, glowing, showing through. Not sure. This is just us experimenting at this point to get a sense of what we want. I'm going to take the old clone tool out and just neaten this arm up a bit. Rough shape of it. I think this is sticking out a little bit too far for my taste as well, so this down here like this, off that corner. So when I was doing this earlier, so we can see like I've gone through this process here of getting the rough shape of this Treeman. I think I do prefer the more like closed-in style. He's in this kind of like I'm ready to fight style, which is how a lot of things in Dominions are. You can see, it's a typical stance for like here's a war dancer site that I did earlier. It's a typical kind of stance. This like I'm ready to fight. It's like a crouch kind of boxing stance almost. And it makes sense because it looks like they're dynamic when they're moving around. You've only got the two sprites, but you can give a great sense of movement by having more dynamic sprite. But I think the tree men are just like these noble but kind of lumbering, unstoppable creatures, and them standing in kind of more of an action stance. I'm not sure, so maybe we want to change his stance slightly to make him just more upright and noble looking. When I was doing this earlier, I did a very similar process to this, but we can see that it turned out slightly differently. I will just grab this and bring it over. So this was slightly different process of doing it, but ended up with a very similar thing. But I went for kind of more of I elongated the stance a bit and made him a little bit less like crouched down. I actually think that there's elements of this that I prefer, and there's elements of this that I prefer. Possibly the torso here, I think I actually prefer over this one. Don't worry about the color difference; it really doesn't matter. You can change the colors for things very easily, kind of en masse. I think the head for this, the like branches and things coming out, is a little bit too busy here, but perhaps a little bit too simple there. But I do prefer the legs here. I do prefer the more upright position of those. Although this we've got to put in a little bit of a loincloth kind of effect, so I think that makes sense. We could kind of have that there. We could have some other bits of foliage. We'll do that at the end, just kind of adding these foliage and things. I'm going to take a little break from doing this, but I will, for you, it won't be any time at all. When I come back, we'll work out which elements of this we're going to keep, which elements of this we prefer, and we'll carry on with this sprite. Hello, I'm back again. I realised upon rewatching the first bit of this video that we couldn't actually see in the video this tool option selection. I was going and changing things in it, but you couldn't see it. So like when I had the paintbrush, I was drawing things, you couldn't see that I was changing the size and the pasty and so on. But I'll just be recording my entire screen now, rather than just the paint shop window, because that seems to solve the problem. So hopefully you'll be able to see all of this, and you can see the difference it makes changing like a pasty 20, very light, lots of brush strokes to put on lots of paint, and a pasty 60 much stronger, need fewer brush strokes to get to the color. Another thing that I've gone and got is this box here, which is the borders of, I believe it's 128 by 128. If we just grab this and make a new image and then have a quick look. Canvas size 128 by 128, which is the largest that the manual says that you can make sprites to put into Dominions. You can actually go beyond that, it's fine. It just starts to go out of bounds of UI elements and things, but it doesn't actually cause any problems. You can make absolutely huge sprites in Dominions, in fact. But I like to keep things within 128 by 128, and this is a giant that I had made for, this is kind of a generic version of the giant I'd made for the Greenskins, and a few other factions had that. So I've got this box so I can just see whether our tree man is looking like he's roughly the right size. I don't want him to be, much bigger or much smaller than a giant. Around giant size is about right. So we can see that he's a little bit shorter than the giant at the moment. His horns put him over the top, but he fits easily in 128 by 128. So I may keep him that size. I think actually though, you can see here that the portion of the legs, it's significantly more than the torso and the head, and we haven't quite got that ratio here. I think having those very long limbs kind of fits the tree men well, and makes them look a little different from the other giant creatures that have a more of a human sort of a proportions. This is the other tree man that I'd made previously. Again, just an outline, but there we've got the proportions. I think I prefer them slightly here, the longer legs. So what I'm going to do, although having talked to people, it seemed that people generally preferred the more dynamic positioning of these legs. So what I'm going to do is probably just extend the length of the legs a bit. I'm just going to do this fairly crudely, I think. So let's just say that we want the legs to be extended by you know about this much. That seems fine. This one will go back a little because obviously it's diagonal. Just grab a nice bright version of this color to use. Put the opacity to 60 again, that's fine. Just fill this in. A little shade on that side. But this is all shin at the moment, so he's going to look weird with just a very long shin, but short upper part of the leg. So we'll probably then move this element down a bit like that, so that we're extending both this bit up here and we're extending shin, the leg overall longer. Okay, I think that proportion seems not bad. I don't think that this guy really has, he has a little bit of a kind of a knee joint. We're representing that knee joint here. Perhaps we want to just put a bit more shade around the edge. Come and clean that up, and we'll maybe have this kind of spike up a bit here. And we're definitely going to have a bit splaying out a bit of the foot down there. And let's do the same thing on this side. So I'm just going to take this join here, the lower leg, and let's drop this. Let's put it out a bit and drop it down a bit like that. Move this foot out a bit. Well, actually, by doing this, I'm going to end up spreading the stance quite a lot, so perhaps I don't want to do that. Perhaps I want to have this foot stay roughly where it is, so the stance doesn't get too spread. If I take the entire thing like so, just move it back in a little bit like that, I think this will probably be okay. So again, we've just got our general shape there. We're not worrying too much at this point about the shading or the colouring of it. It's fine. I find it's quite a peaceful thing to do making these sprites. I find it quite therapeutic. I'm not someone who suffers a great deal from anxiety, but sometimes I can let things get me down more than they should, and doing some of these sprites I find is a good way of just relaxing and gets things back in perspective. It's much like painting miniatures, same thing. I do paint miniatures sometimes, and I find it relaxing, and it's important to, if you're doing something as a hobby, I think just keep it as chill as you can, really. Something that can happen is you can end up putting pressure on yourself, and something that's just supposed to be fun for you can turn into something that feels like work, which is not what you want. Just going to give myself more of a sense of these. Now, I think these horns, I was looking at these, so, a good thing to do is to just stop drawing for a bit sometimes and just step back and take a look at what you've done. And I think a thing with this is, one thing I think that this loin part is a bit too long, so I wanted to change that. So I'm going to grab this roughly. And I'm probably going to be changing the appearance of this a bit, because at the moment this is like a very bright green, and I think I want more of an autumnal look, so I will be changing the colors and things. Again, we're just doing the kind of the basic shapes and stuff at the moment. I'm going to shift this up, this, and just fill in this gap here real quick. Put this on opacity. See, that's the problem with having it too many clicks, too much swinging it around. With the opacity too low. Lovely. I also think these limbs could do with being a little bit longer. Let's push out this forearm a bit like this. Good. That's better. You put this, do you want it at size 2? No, size 1 will do, just filling in this little gap. Now, I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing about the hands. At the moment, they've just kind of made rough fist shapes. This one I think I'm going to extend as well. But I think that I quite like this concept, and I think they've done this partly because this Treeman's so tall, right? If the enemies were all at ground level, then having him just, instead of like bending over and doing a big dramatic swing to reach things on the ground, if he's just got these tendrils that come out of his hands, that's really cool. He can just wreck stuff up with that, and I think that would be very cool for the Dominions unit as well. So I'm going to be replicating this. He's going to have a kind of a a talon that opens up and then a bunch of tendrils come out. So that'll make his attack sprite a bit easier to do. And you can see he's got these big claws and a big thick arm on the other side. For the Treekin, I went with giving him one kind of club arm and one claw arm, and he'll probably have one bashing weapon and one slashing claw on his actual, the monster itself in the game. But I think for the Treeman, one claw, maybe a kind of a stomp attack because he just treads on people. Let's move this, make this arm a bit longer. If this one be a bit longer as well. I think something like that to make these limbs longer. Yeah, I think that would be cool. So that makes things a bit simpler in terms of what we're doing, because it's worth thinking about what you're going to do for the attack sprite. So in Dominions, you get your main sprite and then you get your attack sprite. The attack sprite, you can shift its position a bit so that if you're switching between them, like look at these. I don't even know which one's the attack sprite here. I think this is the standing still sprite, and this is the attack sprite. So if you were flicking between these two things, let's just simulate that by putting this one on top. And if I just delete and then undelete, that's the easiest way to do that. Here is I'm dancing Mar. You can see with a little bit of movement, it's not like a huge change at all. It gives it the sense of it moving. And so we can have our legs repositioned. That's very easy. We just reposition a leg for the attack sprite. We can do that right at the end once we've done everything in the sprite. But it's worth thinking about what you will be changing. Because if you had a guy with a two-handed sword and his arms are both in front of him, crossing across his body, and he's got this sword sticking out. And then for his attack sprite, you want him to raise both his arms up and have the sword up here. Well, the problem you've got there is that if you just drew the arms over the body in the first place, you didn't draw the body. Now you're going to have to draw the body extra, having done that at the end. You're going to have to completely reposition the arms. You might have to completely reposition the legs. You're just making more work for yourself. So I think for this one, his attack sprite is basically going to be that this arm will maybe move a little bit and will have its claws kind of splay out, and this one will reach forward a bit and we'll have a bunch of tendrils coming down here, attacking things in front of him. I think that would work. His face can change. His not tattoos, I guess the etchings into his skin, into his bark, they can glow more strongly. He can move his legs slightly. That's all fine. That's all easy to do. Now, when I'm doing this process, I always just get distracted by things I'm doing, so I just go all over the place. But the nice thing is that you're slowly just picking away at what you're doing. So you're ending up with a sprite that you've just done bits and pieces on as you go along, and it doesn't go through like big dramatic changes of getting closer to being finished, suddenly, like you're not doing huge amounts of work. And I like to leave and come back. I mean, I'm going to be doing that while I'm recording this video. I'm not sitting here doing all of this in one go. I will be leaving and coming back and so on. I find that's more relaxing. Just do it when you feel like doing it. I feel like doing these branches at the moment. I think they look too heavy because I was doing them with a size 2 brush earlier on. I think they don't quite look right. I'm probably going to crush this down quite a bit actually. Goes out a bit too much. Let's take this, drop that down by 1. Let's take this and drop that slightly. Let's down by 1. This is sticking out a bit too far. Okay. Sorry for all of the bonging from the clone brush. Instead of doing that, I can just take a normal brush, because it just bongs every time I'm selecting a new area. I can just put a normal brush to 100% opacity. I don't mind the bongs, I'm very used to them, but I understand they could be a bit annoying if you're listening to this in headphones or whatever. So let me switch to doing this, which is quieter. Oh, this on the wrong color. I'm going to take this opportunity actually, since I just filled in something here with the wrong color, to just show you something I'm going to be using quite a bit, which is the retouch tool. So go and get the retouch tool. I want this at 100% opacity. I'll keep it at size 1 just for now. The retouch tool has got a lot of different modes that you can select from. It can lighten things, it can soften them, it can push, smudge, burn, etc. The thing that I use most of all though is color to target. So I've got a blue thing here. I want the color to be this brown color. I get the retouch tool, I set it to color to target, I left click on here, it takes whatever the primary color is and it turns whatever you've got in there to that shade, that color. So because it's on a pasty 100, it changes it all the way, but you could have it on a pasty 50 if you just wanted to push something to be slightly more green. Like if I took a green and then I said, okay, I'll have this at a pasty, let's say a pasty 20. Let's make it nice and big. Let's say I just wanted these horns here, these antlers, which are branches, of course, to just be a bit more green. I might do something like this. I just take green, I take 20%. Let's have the size just be 20 so I can just demonstrate this. You can see the box there. If I just click on it, oh, hang on, this is in the paintbrush. Go over. I'm using the wrong tool here. Retouch tool, size 20, opacity 20, not very strong. So it's basically just going to shift this towards green, but only by about 20%. Yeah, so it still ends up pretty green, and if I kept clicking, it would turn more and more and more green because it's applying, it's going up to 100%. If we turn it to 100%, see, we can just turn all of this stuff green. But because different colors have different, this fairly muted brown, not very strong brown, if you just turn it green, it's really, really vivid bright green because of the way that it's just switching over the color. So if you're switching between the two, you want to make sure that you're being quite careful with it. If I put this down to opacity, let's put it down way low. Let's make it look like a little bit mossy. See, that has just shifted to be a little bit more green. And of course, you could take this and rather than having a green brush and applying like moss and effects like that, you could just change the color to make it look more mossy. If I decided that I didn't like this turquoise color that I'd been using for the interior glow, if I put the opacity up, size down, let's say I wanted him to have a red glow in his eyes, just go over there with the retouch tool, bam, keeps all of your variation of shades, your gradations, but just changes the color. Not necessarily what you want to do. This might just be too bright, for instance, obviously, and I don't actually think red is a particularly good color for it. But you can see it does keep the gradations of color. Another way you could do it, of course, is you take a red and let's take a bit more of a subtle red. Take a drawing tool and you just draw on directly. But you can see it takes several coats for it to shift. And obviously, when you first do it, if you've got turquoise and red, you're going to get an intermediary color, which is basically a brown. So sometimes you just want to change the entire color. I'll just undo that since I've... So you don't want to do any of that to my sprite. But yeah, where was I? So this was turquoise. I turned this brown. It's a bit too brown, a bit too bright for the rest of this. So just going to do a tiny drop of opacity. What opacity would it be? Let's just go back to 60. We're using that for now. Just right click on that. Left click. There we go. Yeah, I think this looks fairly good in terms of the kind of antlers. We really want them. I keep calling them antlers, but it's just branches. But it's very horn coded. I'll put it that way. Horns growing out of his head, which gives him a kind of a. You could take it as either a bestial look or a bit of a majestic, regal look. I'm not sure. This again is too thick. Move this across. Too thin there. Let's cut this down a bit. A bit of shading on the underside of this. We're probably going to put some leaves and so on the top of this. So this is by no means done with this. But I just felt that they were too thick and it was distracting me. How are we looking? This one looks a bit wonky here. I've kind of taken away some of the sweep of it by moving it. Maybe more like that, and if I drop all of this down by a pixel, that'd probably be fine. So this is on a pasty 100. I don't really want. This is kind of why I use the clone brush actually, because I then don't have to mess with the opacity on my brush so much. But the sound is definitely going to be annoying to people watching this, so I'm trying not to do that. It's interesting how many habits you get into. Like I'm instinctively, I want to remove this. I'm instinctively going over to the clone brush. Maybe I don't want to do that. I'll just pick it off this way. That's quiet. Because that was distracting me a bit, not being able to use my beloved clone brush, I've just turned down the volume a bit, so if I want to delete something, you can see that's much quieter now. Or at least I hope it's much quieter for you. Otherwise, I've defeated the point of me doing that. We think about these branches now. I think that looks pretty cool coming out the top of his head. I'm starting to like the shape a bit more. I'm just going to add some very rudimentary shading now, I think. What do I mean by rudimentary shading? Well, let's say that the brighter color that we want here, on the brightest that we want this wood to get, like maybe this isn't exactly the right color of wood, but we can quite easily change it when we're adding various effects at the end. But let's say that a bright color we want is the color wheel. Maybe something like this. So I'm just going to put this at pasty 100 and I'll show you what this color looks like. Maybe this is kind of the brightest color working up towards. That looks a bit too bright and a bit too orange to me. Let's put it down a little bit like this. How about this? Well, that's maybe the brightest they want to go towards for the moment. So I'm going to take that maybe a little bit brighter like this. So it's a little bit more orange in it and also just a bit lighter, a bit more white in it. A bit more of all of the colors. So that's kind of the brightest that we're working towards. We don't actually want to reach this level of brightness that often. If I put the opacity down, let's put it down to, I don't know, 40 or so for now. And I'll just flatten this out. So you can see if the black color that I've got on the secondary at 40 is quite strong because it's a long way away from this color. So we end up making quite a big difference if we're putting on shading. So maybe for the purposes of highlighting, let's just drop the opacity down. 20 is usually the area that I work with when I'm working with the pixel at a time. See, that's just kind of flattening that out. If we go over the top of it, it's not having such a dramatic effect because it's not such a different color that we're putting in. So what I'm going to do is just using single pixel at a time, just going to, I've kind of just learned the process of doing this. I just want to put darker bits on the undersides, things, maybe a bit on the far side that's further away. Just darken those up. Center of the fist. So this is again, we're not doing the final highlighting that we're going to do. We're just giving a sense of the shape of things. This is definitely this kind of hip part. I definitely want to make this more pronounced. I'm going to highlight this. This is much like what you would do with a model where you're kind of shading the recesses and you're adding highlights to the bits that are sticking out. Around the knee, definitely I want this edge to be fairly pronounced. So I will put in a bit of highlight there. There's a few spots that we just want to even out as we're going along. Let's make this far edge darker, like that. Definitely the back of this, it's almost like a cylinder, this part of his torso, and so the middle of it is going to be brighter, closer, catching more of the light. Definitely want to keep this dark edge here. But yeah, here's the middle bit. And we're not really giving this any kind of texture at the moment. These are just like basic. I mean, it's gaining some texture just from us filling around. We're not doing like big blocks. We're not going, here's a line of one shade, here's a line of the next shade, here's a one shade dark, here's one shade darker. Because it is just gaining texture from us essentially like picking at it with a single pixel brush. So you are gaining some kind of texture to it, which is good because it's wood rather than metal, or it would be a bit more uniform. Maybe we want to have this a bit more pronounced, so we'll put in a bit more shading there. Definitely want to have a bit of a kind of a cuff there. Interior of the arm, let's have that be darker. Definitely this bit's going to be darker here. Lovely. Let's have the edge of this be a bit darker. Darken this bit too. Let's extend this slightly. Yeah, that looks kind of good. So I'm really just going by what I think is cool here. Now we've got a bit of a joint here that's not really showing anything at the moment, so let's definitely make this darker. Doesn't matter if it's the bit that we decided would be kind of turquoise, we can add that in later. Let's make this darker here. Definitely want this to come across like an edge, so we want that to be a bit lighter. Let's have this. So I think we wanted to like a whole darker bit around his neck. He has got a sort of a neck we want to suggest here, but not really. It's kind of just the impression of there being a neck there. And then we're going to have these roots, branches, tendrils, whatever you want to call them, growing out of this. So we'll have another one here. We'll darken this bit up a bit. Underneath the jaw, yeah, for sure, want to darken that up. Let's extend this a bit. Tendril coming. This, I think maybe this shoulder could do moving out slightly. So let's do that. Zoom out and have a little look at him. Yeah, we're getting the impression now of a kind of a ridge around his neck. I think we need a bit more of it on this side. So I'm just gonna shade that up a bit. And then definitely want to have the sense of some sort of tendrils coming up. It's quite nice drawing these like fractal like tree branches, twigs and limbs and things. It's quite a fun thing to do. Shade the far side of this a little bit. Definitely got another joint there that we want to shade in. Maybe want to have this extend out this way a little bit. Grab this clone brush and just pull away some of this. I want to call it gunk, but you know what I mean. It's just stuff, mass. So this bit's all dark here. Got a nice joint that we're getting in there. Good, that's going well. Get that in. The underside's obviously quite dark. Top side, fairly dark too. That maybe is a bit sticking out a little bit too much. Let's smooth that line out a little bit. Let's take that off. So this arm is looking kind of a little thinner than this one. This one's a bit more chunky. I think maybe the fist needs to move across a pixel. Let's just do that quick. Like that. That's a good sweep of the arm. I like that. He doesn't really have any biceps or muscles that we need to do, but we still want to have the suggestion of some shapes. So we want to have like this bit flaring out here, so we can have more shading in the middle and less over here. I definitely want to make sure that this looks like a proper joint, and then have some more growth of twigs and things coming out here. Yeah, that looks cool. Just going to fill in a couple bits there. Got a little bit of green in these joints at the moment, and I think I will keep that, but I don't need to be really careful with preserving it because we can just come back later with the color replacer tool and put it in. Really darken that up quite a bit actually. So we're just hacking away at it, picking away at it, and if we zoom out a bit, we're starting to get more of a sense of the shape. And this is what I'll do when I'm doing a sprite this big. Just want to get the shape done first. Get it roughly correct. I could even probably go to size 2 for some of this shading, just sweeping down one side of the leg, doing the underside of the fist, we're doing the back side of an arm, just take it size 2, just throw in 20 opacity, so we're not doing too strong a thing here. There's nothing really important here that we're trying to preserve. Don't be afraid of going like, well, I made this look worse, I messed this up. It's fine. When you've got the final sprite at the end, when you're putting on the final details and things, it would suck if you were then going, I'll just throw some more shading on. That would probably not be great. I really want to emphasize that there's a gap here between this chest part. So what's the actual shape that we want to get here? Soften the edge of that slightly. So we're really going to go quite dark there, and we're going to re-put in the impression of this arm coming down here. Let's have a look. How does that look? Ooh, maybe a bit too much there. Just a touch too much. We've got a kind of a joint that we want to show at the top here, but it's a bit difficult because this doesn't really look like it's one contiguous part at the moment. Maybe I want to bring this arm in a little bit. Let's have a look. Yeah, maybe I want to. So I'll just cut that off. This bit's all growing out here from the chest area, and then we'll have the arm decidedly terminating around here. Gives us a good sense of there being a joint. We'll shade the underside of it up nicely. Shade the top bit. We can add some texture and so on into that later. Right, not looking bad. Too bad. You can see why it takes me so long to do a sprite. I don't have a good method of doing it at all. I'm just doing whatever I want. But all I can do is show you the method that I use, you know. So we definitely want to go a slightly different color here. I think this is looking a little bit too red for me, honestly. I'd kind of prefer a little bit of a darker color, possibly just a bit more washed out and bleached color. I'm not sure. We've got quite a few different browns that we can copy. This is kind of a brown fur. We've got some kind of woody browns over here. Let's have a look at our dryads. So this was kind of a lighter dryad that I ended up using. Here's a kind of an autumnal brown. Here's a more of a spring brown. I think let's we're gonna go somewhere between this kind of this is like the spring color. This is my like winter dark, you know, a little bit evil looking stuff. I think I'm just gonna grab these two browns actually, them over, so we can compare with those. So that's kind of the tone that we want to go for. Yeah, we're looking a bit kind of clay-like compared to those. I think they're slightly more washed out. If I take one of these browns, I'm just going to take this as my primary color, and then I'm going to take a retouch tool. Just going to put it size up. I'm just going to have a look at what would happen if I recolored to this color, this shade. So you can see there's a bit more green in there. It's less red. What do we think? Do we prefer that color? Or let's have a look at this color here. This is a similar shade, slightly different. I think it's a little bit more red. We retouch with this color. Yeah, I think this is the kind of this is the color I kind of like the look of. Is more this. Maybe a touch more washed out, so we'll just move it so it's got less less orange in it, and just move it a bit more to this color. Let's just have a look at what that looks like. Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to go with. This is basically going to be color. So what I'm going to do is, this is just using the recolor tool. I'm just going to recolor all of this wood that I've done to the same basic color. But one of the things is that when I've been shading it, you can see it's been getting darker and darker, but of course it's getting more and more like washed out, or it's less colorful, more towards just like a monochromatic color, because I've been using black. I haven't actually been saying, oh, make this darker. I've actually just been taking a black brush and painting over the top of it, basically. So when we're doing this, you're going to see that these shaded bits are going to appear to be a bit more colorful. And as we shade, sometimes that's a way to correct for the fact that you've made something look washed out. You could actually do shading and highlighting just using white and black. You could say like, okay, I want this ridge to be more pronounced. I want this fist to have this kind of sweeping curve to it. I want the top of these twigs to stand out more in color. You could do that, and you could say, okay, this bit, just apply the black and make it darker. And then having done all of that highlighting, you could take a color tool and just put it back to the color that you actually want. It's not the way that I prefer to do it, but you could do that. So you see you end up with quite a bright color by doing that. That's a little bit too extreme for me at the moment. I will kind of build up to that. Things should basically be highlighted in quite an extreme, eye-catching way, especially if they're big things. But Dominions has a little bit more of a muted style to it in its artwork, and I want to stick to that a little bit more. Warhammer's a bit more wild, extreme highlights, extreme lowlights. That's what I do when I'm painting models. I always push it quite far. Yeah, let's just recolor this. So I'm dodging this at the moment. Sigils that I put on there because I quite like them. They can stay for now. We did them in a hurry, but that's fine. Some of the things you do in a hurry look, if it looks good, just keep it. So let's sweep under here, over here. Oh, replaced. I kind of like the green look under there, but I can just add that back in, so it doesn't matter if I color over the top of that at the moment. Yeah, I'm not even going to try and avoid doing that on this arm. So there we've got the arm sorted. Boom. Just looking on the crown bit. Pretty good. Pretty good. Obviously, I could make this bigger. There's a few things. This tool, I could make it bigger. I could auto-select things of a particular color and change them to another color. There's a lot of cool tools like that you can get. Do stuff within even this old janky Paint Shop Pro 6. I'm using this tool because it's what I'm familiar with. I'm not recommending it to you or anything. So let's go and take a nice bright one. Let's do some highlights on these horns, I think. That'll look nice. So we're going to take a bright one and then we're going to make it even brighter, I think. Probably going to go something like this because I'm going to be doing pretty low opacity. I'm going to knock this down 15 maybe. Yeah, that's fine. And just going to add some features to this guy. Ooh, that's a bit too strong. Not sure. I want to knock the opacity down more or make this color a bit less extreme. Let's make the color a bit less extreme and keep the opacity around it was. Okay. So I just want, I think if we look at him, horns, you'd usually have like an area around it that's, if you're drawing a horn, you'd have like an area where it joins to the head. Let's just draw a nice simple kind of Minotaur head. Yeah. Imagine here's a Minotaur, right? If you were drawing a horn, let's chuck on a filter. Here's your horn. If you had like the head color, just a moment. Just kind of, woo. Oh, I have a gap. But the filter will escape through the gaps, and I had a gap. There we go. Yeah, you'd have like a bit of shading around the horn and everything, right? Where it's like, oh, this bit is underneath the horn, it's shaded. The horn is a bit separate. The underside of the horn's got some shading on it. Maybe this bit's got some shading, and there you go. You kind of got the impression of a horn in the head of this creature, this Minotaur that we've drawn. But because this is just a branch that's part of its head, I don't think that this separation of the two things makes any sense. I think we should be more like just sweeping out of the forehead. And I think to give the impression of these two bits sweeping out the forehead, we also want to kind of have a bit shaded here. So let's just have a kind of a divot here. This one's further back, so I don't want to. This is the kind of background one. Just want to be careful about that. We've got the right shape. We don't want to be messing with that. Jenna just a bit. You push the opacity up actually. I think a bit over 20 speed. Now remember that we can mass shade this entire thing if we want to make the entire thing a bit less highlighted. So maybe we'll do that later. There's definitely going to be some foliage that I'm sticking up at the top here as well. Don't get me wrong, this is going to have some foliage. Doesn't quite look right, does it? Kind of looking gnarled. I like the sweep of this one. This one a little bit less so, but can always fiddle with that at the end. I like this shading under the eye here. Sweeping down. Definitely want to have a fairly pronounced jaw area. He's got kind of like a Judge Dredd scowl. We could even extend this, to be honest. I feel like his face could be a bit bigger. They don't have noses or anything, Treeman. Just an unhappy expression and a couple of eyes. You know, his eyes at the moment are quite large. We could make them smaller. We could certainly de-emphasize them a bit. If we take this brown and we paint it over the turquoise, it's just going to blur the boundaries between those two bits, but it's going to make his eyes appear to be a bit smaller. I think we have that there. There's the impression of the neck that we were talking about, but not too much. Just a little bit. Definitely want this gap here. Make it feel like there's some tendrils and things coming out here. So we want some that are in the foreground, which are brighter, but then we also probably just want something coming up in the background. And you can see this looks really grey at the moment, but of course we can just go to our colour and retouch it whenever we want. Just colour retouch that to be more present. Give the impression of some more tendrils and things. Just dots of colour in here. Our background ones. How are they going to look when we color it? Strong. Let's shade that a bit more. Shade that a little bit more. I don't feel totally happy with this almost shoulder pauldron, I don't know what you want to call it. I'm going to dump this across by 1. I'm going to reduce, put that across by 1 as well. I'm really going to reduce the amount that this sticks out because it just doesn't look right to me at the moment. Just going by eye. And I might actually extend the amount that this thorax comes out here. Just shading along a little bit. Let's have a little look at that. Yeah, I think that's better, although I don't want the far side of the thorax to be quite so... I'm going to go real heavy on the shading here. Don't want it to be quite so intruding as that. How are we looking? Check the colour on there again. Yeah. Wouldn't say it's perfect. It doesn't quite have the same feel to it as this other side. It doesn't look totally symmetrical, but then that's... If we were drawing a breastplate, we would push this whole thing back for sure. I think I am going to be even more aggressive with this. Pushing this back. Get rid of some of this. Just put in a new sort of a tendril. Yeah. This is that being that kind of brown, that's fine. As long as it doesn't appear to be, as long as there's a sensible gap between his face. This bit can look like background tendrils, it's fine. Split the end of a couple of these a little bit more. They are tendrils, they can be out there searching. Really get some good shading on this bit, I think. The top of the arm. Alright, he really is starting to take shape a bit more now. Always remember to take a, zoom out, stand back, think about what he'll actually look on the battlefield. A very important thing to remember about green things as well, because often the battlefield is green. Let's take an elf and put an elf next to him. Have a look. Just one of my basic elves where I do nicely so. I mean, he is absolutely towering over this elf. I think we've got a very good impression of size now. So yeah, I'm happy with the size of him. I'm happy with the shape of him, more or less. I think I want to change the feet and the legs and everything. Need some more details, but I'm kind of getting happy with this these tendrils and things coming around this main chest part. I definitely think that we want to have some more of this, these runes, sigils. I don't really know what to call them. Squiggly squirrels, we'll call them. Let's go hard on these squiggly squirrels. I think don't necessarily want them all to be connected to each other. Well, that is just said let's go hard. That's too rich for my blood. Go even lower than that. All right, that's good. I think sort of a hook shape. I haven't really got any meaning I'm ascribing to these at all. It could be looking up, elf runes, wood elf runes. What do they look like? It could say various things. That might be a cool thing for someone to do, but I think I'm just going to go with what looks good. I think that's what I'll do. This almost looks like the stripes that appear on like birch trees on their bark, which is kind of cool. Do we want anything on this cod piece? I don't know. Let's come back to that one. Up here, let's have a nice bright one like that. Let's put a tiny bit coming down like this. I want that to be darker because it's on the outside. Cool. Good. I forgot to recolor this bit earlier, so I'm just gonna in a bit. Let's grab this bright. Sometimes the useful thing to do, because I use the dropper really quickly, is you can take these colors, rather than going to the color wheel, you can just have a palette of colors. So let's say I wanted all different gradations of this turquoise, I'd probably just go like this with like a mid pasty brush. See what I mean? Then got like a selection of them. We can go, absolutely bright at the end if you want to. So then you've got a nice selection of colors you can just pick whenever you want with their the eyedropper. So if I want to just quickly add some really bright bits, I can just click here and do this. So when I remember to do that, I do it. I'm such a lazy painter. Or yeah, let's just call this painting because this is basically what it is. This is pretty much the same as miniature painting. This is sprite painting. We're not using any paint, but we're using Paint Shop Pro. It's got the word paint in it. What more do you want? Definitely want something appearing on this arm, but maybe it'll be coming in from the top. This it's not turquoise enough for me. I want to get a more turquoise color. If we washed it out, yeah, we've washed it out a little bit by putting it on there. Let's go to there. Washed it out a little bit by putting on this black background. You just get the color retouch and okay, that is too much. So we'll wash that out a bit. Lovely. What are we going to do about this hand? I want this to kind of be a claw that a load of tendrils comes out of. So let's just take a really take a nice light color and Think about how this could be kind of coming up. Maybe if we've got it kind of like a claw like this, right? And then when he, so let me just think. I'm actually going to turn my body physically to think about how this guy's standing. Okay, he's standing like this. All right. He doesn't have thumbs or anything like that. He's a tree man, but he does want to have kind of a humanoid shape, and I think that is going to necessitate us moving this slightly. So otherwise he's going to look like he's got a freakish shape to him. Looks like his hands on backwards. I tell you what, I didn't really like the way that this hand's backing out, but maybe what we want to do, let's just take this off. I'm gonna rotate this real quick. What am I doing? Mirror it around? Yeah, let's do that. I'm gonna take this hand, and I'm gonna have him, instead of having his hand kind of drooping over like that, he's gonna be holding it up. He's gonna have his thumb coming up here. He's gonna be kind of doing a power grasp. And the nice thing about doing something like this is that if you want to, like let's say this was a spellcaster, we could have him have fire that he's holding in the palm of his hand, something cool like that. Shift this across slightly. Shade the center here. Just getting the rough shape once more. Yeah, I think you're looking. It's going to be a shape. Quite right, is it? That's a bit better. I definitely want to keep this hand as a fist. I think that looks more dynamic. Got this. It's kind of bits jutting out here. Might be a bit too bright, to be honest. Let's put maybe this. See, as we're going along, things are getting just a bit more texture. Okay, I went a bit too bright with this over here. And because this is wood, we don't want to smooth any of this out. We want to have it just have little bits that are brighter and darker and raised up and not raised up and so on. Raised up and hollowed out. Let's have a bit that's carved in like that. Maybe we're going to give the impression of some just rib-like kind of lines coming in here. See how it looks. Take a step back and see how it looks. Maybe, not sure. For now, flatten them out a little bit, I think. Maybe a bit too strong that actually. Definitely like this edge here on this. I like this sense that we've got going on here of the edge of this almost carapace. Highlighting there, a bit more shading. Really not happy with this hand. Don't usually have this much trouble with them. Oh hey, there you go. Having done it, basically what I did was put it on upside down, and then went, oh, I need to fix that. Turn it over, and then it just put it back on upside down again. But yeah, I think that looks better now. You can tell that I didn't take any art anatomy classes, can't you? I almost have no sense of why things look good. So I just concentrate on what looks roughly right. I don't really think about why. Which is not always the best way to do things, for sure. Let's give the impression of some of these tendrils coming out. So the tendrils are going to be greeny, kind of a green-blue. Kind of a green-blue would work for the tendrils. You can have them be basically any color because they're going to be kind of a splash of color to what we're doing. That might be a bit too washed out. Let's knock the opacity down on this. Just have tendrils peeking out. Just peeking out here. Doing anything yet, not active. You can see that they're there. Maybe we want to have a bit of a color gradation in here, so maybe the tendrils are a little bit more blue or even purple, kind of at the end. Let's try that out, see what it looks like. Just try it out and see what it looks like. It's always a good idea. Possibly. I think we'll revisit that. See if we're happy with it. Fisticuffs over here. I think I want his fist to be even bigger than that. I think we want to emphasize that this is an edge. Emphasize the shading underneath it. Make this fist bigger. Bigger, bigger, bigger. And de-emphasize that. So it looks a bit too spherical now because of the shading I put on. Let's fix that. Doesn't quite have a humanoid hand, but if you imagine there's a thumb here, go something like that. Tighten this fist up a bit. Let's put the impression of some kind of fingers and things in there. That's a bit too much. Oh, happy accident. see what happens if we put on a bit of... Whoa. Hello, you're not the colour I was using earlier. Let's get the shade right. There we go. I don't think I like the impression of these finger parts, to be quite honest with you. Cool, get rid of them. You can emphasize the thumb, I think that's okay, but I think the fingers did not look good. Straighten this up a bit. Lovely. Alright, let's crank the opacity back up. Need to make this cod piece stand out a bit more in the middle. There we go. Not really much needs to be done with that, just shading up, highlighting up to our brighter colours. Similarly here, going to do the same. Going to add the impression of some rib-like parts. Center, cool. Up to size 2 for a minute, so I can just trunk of this leg to be a bit more. And this bit. Side. Alright, I think we need to put some branches in on this leg to break up the shape of it, because it just looks like a big rectangle. We don't want that. Definitely want to give the impression of an edge here. I like the idea of this kind of growing out here. This looks a bit too smooth. What could we do to break this shape up slightly? Actually just have a crack here, so it kind of bifurcates. And we'll put in some of this, some of the green and so on. Yeah, that looks kind of good, doesn't it? Having a crack there. Maybe we'll do the same here. Have it so it kind of bifurcates like that. Go a bit brighter. I think we're safe to get a bit brighter. What are we going to do about the feet? I don't know. What do the feet look like on this guy? Here they've got this kind of cool, it's a bit more like of a hoof, kind of a carapaced hoof. We could give him, honestly, we could have him have almost like roots coming down. I don't think that would look bad at all. And then as he moves, they kind of tear up, you know. You can shade the edges of this to make it look like there's some roots and things coming out. Maybe over here, like this. Think of that. Kind of a rooted foot. I think it looks interesting, and interesting is good enough for me. Well, even though I'm in the middle of doing this, I think I'm going to take a break in a minute. It won't be a break for you watching the video. But just to give you a sense of, I could just take a break in the middle of it. Yeah, it's a nice thing to do when you're doing Sprite. Have a think about what you're doing. Do something else. If you get distracted like me. Yeah. Let's have another, just like a bifurcated bit there. That's looking a lot more tree-like, that's for sure. Just having these details that almost, here's a bit where we're going to have like a knobbly bit coming out. Then we're going to shade around the bottom of it. And have the rest of the leg kind of carry on. And that's like the Minotaur horn that I was trying to show earlier. But it's like a piece coming out of him. Probably going to want to reshade that a little bit. But get the idea. Let's do a similar thing here. Got kind of a bit of a stump bit coming out. This leg. Maybe we have the same thing upside down here. Don't want to go too heavy on that because the top side of it wouldn't really be particularly shaded. We definitely want to put some more of these turquoise bits on here. I think maybe I want to... Yeah, you know what? I think what this needs is some spiky bits. We're doing Warhammer, right? It's all, it's all spikes in Warhammer. I think I like this more thorny aesthetic. I think this is an improvement. Yeah, I think I like this. Maybe I'm going to put this sleeve on the hand slightly back here, the cuff, I should say, which gives me a little bit more room to put a shaded bit in there. And it separates it a little bit from this spike coming out over here. I think that looks good. Brighten this up because it draws the eye to these little branches. This one's almost in the background, so leave that in the background. All right, I think some more good progress. Just before I take a break, I'm gonna really brighten up the eyes. I think we want to make sure that they're looking not just like a blue bit, but like glowing, you know, supernatural energy. So we'll do that there. Do it a little over here. These glyphs. Glyphs, I think, is the right word for them. Oh no, that's kind of orky, isn't it? Sigils. We'll call them sigils. I've settled on sigils. And we'll draw them on the legs. Come back. He's starting to shape up. I think he's starting to look cool, and that's all I really care about.